Welcome to the Super Region 4 Playoff Podcast. That's a mouthful. I'm Matt Witwicky, better known as Wit to some of you, the Northern Sun football podcaster from NSIC Weekly. And I'm not being joined by my normal pod partner, Tom Frederick, as he's moved on to basketball. And we're not going to be reviewing Northern Sun stuff tonight. Instead, we're going to be taking a look at the Super Region 4 playoffs. And I get a chance to be joined by our newish RMAC columnist, Antonio Clark. How are you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to talk some playoff football.
Now, for those who don't know, AC was a star DB for Colorado Mesa and the RMAC, and now has been a great new addition to our D2 family. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead, since, people are here to see us talk a little bit about the bracket. Let's go ahead and pull up the bracket as we go ahead and get into the Super Region 4, pod. And as we take a look here, buddy, I see 7 teams. We got 4 of them seeded. What were your initial reactions when you went ahead and kind of saw the show the other day?
When I saw it, I wasn't too surprised. I knew the seeding I didn't know how the seeding would play out. But
Sure.
All the teams I thought would get in, got in. The only team that I thought could maybe possibly get bounced just because of the way their game went last week was possibly Central Washington. I didn't know if they'd value Wayne State, and that went over Augie. I didn't know if Pueblo and their losses to 3 really stout teams would help them out. That was probably just me being an RMAC hopeful, wishing in the dark. But I wasn't too surprised overall to see this field of teams.
Yeah, we had kind of talked for a few weeks on our stuff about it looked like it was trending to be this 7 for a little while. Duluth had a big win over Mankato to end the regular season. However, their strength of schedule was just so low that they really had a hard time even having a puncher's chance at the end there, being about 70, 80 points shy of both Mankato and Bemidji, who they had a 3-way tie with. Mm-hmm. And they all beat each other. So it ended up being, how's the rest of your resume? And Bemidji and Mankato look better that way. Central Washington, like you mentioned, I was kind of curious as to see how the committee viewed that one-sided loss, to Permian. But I think being unbeaten, they already had themselves in a good enough spot kind of coming into that versus D2 competition.
Now, can I ask you something about that, actually?
Absolutely.
As I've been welcomed into the D2 family and I'm learning more, I understand that non-D2 games don't count in this, but they did lose to an NAIA school this season.
You know what? I think that's one of those things that when you have the committee in there together for Super Region 4, and you've got I think six folks who are in there, a combination of athletic directors and coaches, and they're all from the Super Region. I don't know how that doesn't come up and color your thoughts when you're looking at a team. I'll be real frank with you. And I really think that's why amongst the one-loss teams, you saw them get slotted the lowest. Mm-hmm. And that was my thoughts behind it is that's kind of their way of punishing them is saying, you know what, we know you lost to an NAIA. Now, that NAIA just did squeak by and make the playoffs in the NAIA. But at the same time, you know what? They probably should have won that football game if they're a Division II playoff team, if we're going to be real honest with ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I think that was an interesting one. But at the same time, their other loss to FCS, Weber State, that was obviously not much of anything. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how it doesn't when they come down to figuring out who's 1 through 7 and everybody's got to do their own vote. I think it probably does kind of color the voting a little bit, to be real honest with you.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, as I've been doing my homework, as we've been getting ready for the playoffs, that's been something that stuck out like a sore thumb to me this entire time.
Right. And you know what? I mean, that's also going to bring in the question of, you know what? Now they're in with playoff competition, and how Central Washington to do there because their last game obviously is probably a little bit of concern for some of their fans.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Well, let's go ahead and take a little bit of a look at some of these squads that we have. We're going to go ahead. We're going to start off top of the page, Colorado Mines, and we're going to go ahead and play a little bit of video here. And I'm going to kind of pull down the graphic for a moment so everybody can see a little bit of these teams. We'll start off with Mines, as I alluded to a moment ago. They're led by their all-world, all-everything quarterback, John Matocha, and I'm not joking when I say that he's that good. Their defense is probably undersold a little bit, in my opinion. And you go ahead and you see the way Matocha can make both plays with it, with his arm, with his feet. Their defense holds up. They're just in attack mode right from the get, and this is their win against Western Colorado that we all thought was going to be a really close game. You obviously, being out there in the RMAC, tell me a little bit more about. I just mentioned a few things about him. What else do you think of with this squad?
I think you couldn't have said it better. Their defense is so undersold. They have one of the best front sevens in the land. They harass quarterbacks. If you go look at quarterback statistics, Chance Fuller, former MIAA guy, really good quarterback. He's been amazing this year. Not versus Mines. Drew Nash was amazing all year. Part of the reason we thought that Western would be in that game when he got faced with that front seven and that relentless pressure, it's overwhelming to say the least. So I think their defense gets a little bit undersold. I think they're even a little bit better on the back end. They're a little bit more athletic than you think. You think School of Mines in technology, they're probably nerds, but they have a lot of good team speed and they're multifaceted. On offense, they can beat you running the ball. Noah Roper and Landon Walker are some great, big, physical running backs. But they can also beat you over the top. They can beat you dink and dunking. I think Matocha's the best player in the land, bar none. So Mines is, I think they're comfortably, I think they're the heavy favorite right now.
Well, I've been saying on our national show that I still have Matocha winning the Harlan Hill, and I'm dying on that hill. So you're dying on that hill with me. That's good.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, the winner of the Augustana Minnesota State game will get Mines. So let's take a quick look at. We'll look at the visitors first. Minnesota State. This is from the Mavericks playing here their last game, and that's Hayden Necker and their quarterback, who can good runner, good thrower as well. They are not quite as experienced in the receiving corps as they've been in the past. Their defense still going to get after you. And you can see Akron's got a nice throwing arm, transfer from University of South Dakota. He's a Chicago boy like I am. There's our guy. You remember who that is?
Shane Butler Lawson.
Exactly right. And now, Butler Lawson's been up and down this season, if we're going to be real frank. He's had games where he puts up 200 yards and multiple touchdowns and games where he rushes for about 50 yards. Now, Augustana held them to that lower kind of total I just mentioned last time. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge right now for Mankato is how well can they establish themselves physically with the running game that they want to do against Augie. And here's Augie right now. And this was actually in that game against Mankato. That's Mr. Epperson, their running back. And there's Butler Lawson struggling right there to find some space. This one is at Augustana. Nice stadium they have there, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And this is yours truly video as they went ahead. And interesting thing there, they were fourth and about, 5? And Mankato had kept calling timeouts. And Augustana said, well, okay, I guess we won't just end the game running it. And they took a shot over the top, and that ended the game. So, but Augustana and Mankato conference, opponents from the Northern Sun playing each other. It's always hard to beat a team that's really good like Mankato twice in a year. Mm-hmm. Because the motivation kind of flips as well. I mean, AC, you know about this. All of a sudden, if you got to play a team again in the playoffs, you beat them during the regular season. Yeah, it's like all of a sudden they're the ones who come in with all the vigor, and you're the one who's kind of having to hope not to lose. And
the hunter becomes the hunted. The hunter
Yeah,
becomes the
exactly.
hunted.
So
As I look at that game, it's going to boil down to, like you said, can Shane Butler Lawson get it going and have can he showcase that talent like he has at other points in this season? And then on the other end, can Mankato stop Jared Epperson? He's been on a tear as of late. He's been
totally
tearing it
has.
up, and he does it receiving out of the backfield as well as running the ball. If they can possibly stop him, as we saw in those highlights, he had a day that day last time they played. I think that's the real matchup right here. Which team stops the other team's all-world guy?
That's a good way to put it. I like that. Okay, so as we move to the bottom portion of the bracket, we talked about Central Washington a moment ago. They have to make a trip to Western Colorado. Obviously, it's a flight. Let's take a little bit of a look here at Central Washington. They're here in the red right now. And, they're an athletic squad, but they have not been, crazy offensively. There's their guy, Tyler Flanagan, who I think may be their best offensive football player. He's a load. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Here they are doing a little bit of trickeration against Weber State. One thing I think that really is undersold sometimes with this squad is I think they're very good defensively. I think that they had it was a 14-all game at half that they had last week with Permian, and Permian hit some deep shots down the field that totally changed that football game. And I've watched Central Washington a few times this year, and more times than not, they're physical defensively. They're not going to allow much, and they're going to kind of try and play a little bit of a ball control running game, and be opportunistic. And they're going to have to do that against Western Colorado, who we're going to view here in a moment that you're very familiar with. And
Mm-hmm.
Western Colorado gets after you defensively, and they're going to be playing at home, and they play real well at home.
Mm-hmm.
And they've got a lot. They kind of spread things out a little bit, on offense. They've got some weapons like Davion Butler is a great running back, and Drew Nash, their
Mm-hmm.
quarterback's a nice player as well. But they like to pressure up front.
Oh yeah.
Get after people. And when you see some of these highlights, what are some other things you've been writing about them all year? They're kind of a pressure cooker team, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Defensive coordinator Todd Auer. He's bringing at least 5 or 6 every single play, every play, and he's bringing it from different areas, stunts, different blitzes. It's as an offensive player, I would imagine it's a very hard game plan. Like the offensive line, just getting
Right.
your checks, making sure you know what you're doing on each play. I think it's going to be a big undertaking for Central Washington. And I mean, Western, one of their best players that hasn't been talked about is Kendall Hollowell, their linebacker. If you go look at Kendall Hollowell's stat line, he's leading them in tackles. He has over 5 sacks. He's close to about 10 TFLs. He has multiple
Sure.
interceptions, a couple forced fumbles. Their front is just it's second to mine's in my mind. So they get after it. And as far as offensively, Davon Butler, when he got it going, he's had it going the past 2 weeks. I think he went over 200 the week before. He went for 170 last week. But it's kind of like he's also their Achilles heel. The only game that they've lost this season, him and Braden Hogan weren't able to get over 100 yards rushing. Every other
Right.
game they've gotten over 100 yards. Their next closest one was actually UTPB, held them to 101. They still won that game by 3 points. So if Central Washington can stop the run, they can have some success. Like we seen Drew Nash, he's been amazing this year, no doubt. But in the Mines game, frankly, when it was on him, the running game had no answer. Western, they weren't as dynamic as they've looked all year. So Central Washington, I think it's pretty clear cut on both sides. Stop the other team's running game, and you're probably going to win. I think if Western can jump out to a 1 or 2 score lead though early, just because Central Washington, based on what I've seen, and I'm not going to act like I'm an expert, but they're not a team that's really passing the ball and has great passing statistics. They're not really prolific through the air. I think if Western can get an early lead and then they can really dial it up, this game could possibly, go one way. Whereas I think Central Washington only wins by grinding it out, ball control football and whatnot.
Well, and that brings up an important point is Central Washington's quarterback, Kennedy McGill, is a redshirt freshman who started the last 3 games, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's played a little bit before that, coming in as a running quarterback. Very athletic guy, but at the same time, this is a much different situation he's now being put in. And, last week they weren't very successful in a pressure cooker situation at Permian. So it puts him kind of under the microscope. And if he can make plays and Tanner Flanagan, the running back, can get going, I think that puts them in a position where if their defense can kind of keep it close, that's kind of their best angle. You mentioned it, a top defender a moment ago. A lot of people don't realize Central Washington has Tanner Volk, who's got 100 tackles,
11 picks.
11 picks, all from his safety position. He's going to be an All-American. End of story.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a nice DB, a great corner in Patrick Rogers.
Oh, yeah.
People don't like to throw at him a whole lot.
Physical. His stats aren't crazy this year just because people stopped throwing to him this year finally.
Yeah, and he was on our Elite 100 team coming into the season. So they've got some guys on defense that are not just good, but real good. So, there's some interesting little angles to that game. And that kind of leads us then to our final one, which is Bemidji State traveling from Canada Junior, where they're at, down to Permian Basin in West Texas. And we're not getting snow all the way up here in the north right now, but this could have been an interesting scenario one way or the other, especially if it had been snowing at Bemidji and this was the flip. That would have been something.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go ahead and take a look at Bemidji State first. And here's Bemidji in the green. They've got all-world quarterback Brandon Alt, who has been a All-American level player going on 3 years. And here they are. Great play by the DB on that play. And you've also got Ali Muhammad, running back, who's been, hasn't quite been as productive as was earlier in the year. But Bemidji, they've been able to run the ball a little bit better this year than they had. They're still not what I would consider a fully balanced team. They're still pretty pass heavy in the back half of this season, but they'll get after you up front. They have the most sacks of any team in Super Region 7 in the playoffs here. So, they're coming in averaging almost 4 sacks a game. And they have the Northern Sun Defensive Conference Player of the Year, Mr. Hansen at left tackle or lefty end. He's coming in here with like 10 sacks, and they're going to get after, Permian, I think, up front. But Permian has got a dangerous offense. And we're going to take a look at them here right now. A little bit of video of UTPB and famous last words. Let's see here. And I don't think our Permian Basin video is not playing. So, here we go. There's Mr. Hernser, who is a great quarterback for Permian. He's kind of like our Matoka Jr. in this comparison. And I mean that in an extremely complimentary way. He just doesn't have the extent of career stats, but he's got a lot of really good numbers. And, you got an aggressive defense here. I think their defense is a touch undersold, and we'll see that here in a minute. I like the reaction there. Let's, with all that said, I want to go ahead and pull up a little bit of our stat comparison that we have. Before we do, let's go ahead and show everyone our fancy map. We spent hours doing this, AC. That should be done. But this gives an indication. Take a look at the eastern part of the country, okay, where Super Region 1 is, Super Region 2, Southeast.
They're all close.
Region 3. They're all so much more concentrated, and look at where we are here. So, and for those who don't know, I mean, AC's over in Colorado, and we're looking here at Bemidji, Mankato, and Augustana, all up in Minnesota and South Dakota area. Then we've got, as we move kind of southwest of that, you got Mines and Western in Colorado. And then you have to go down a flight to get to Permian Basin, which is actually underneath where the Falcon is, not where the Falcon is.
Definitely not where the Falcon is.
And then in the top left corner, we've got Central Washington. It shows why we're seeing flights here as opposed to drives, because the Northern Sun right here can't drive to the RMAC. The RMAC can't drive to the Lone Star. So it's wild how far away they are on that map. But, if we take a look at a comparison of stats, there's some things to me that are borderline shocking on this page, AC.
Mm-hmm.
The area that you see we've got on the left side, we've got the team's record. Then we've got their offensive and defensive points per game, the points per game margin. Then we have offensive and defensive yards per game and margin. And then we have turnover margin. The leader in the categories is underlined. It's all one team.
They're the best team in the land.
If we did this in any other super region, there's no way that one team is doing all of those things.
No way.
I mean, that says a whole lot for Mines, because we're not comparing them here with bad teams. And
all
by the way,
playoff caliber teams.
Absolutely. I do have one, our crack staff, which probably is me, has Bemidji record down as 9-2. They're actually 8-2. They did not have a non-con.
Oh.
So, and we, you know what, guys, for full disclosure, we did pull out of the points per game the 96-0 win of Permian over Texas College of the NAI, because that was a wildly, a game that would really distort everything. So
can I tell you what jumps out at me first glance at this?
Absolutely.
So Mines far left is 1, Western 2. Western's 1 loss is to Mines. UTPB behind Western, UTP's 1 loss to Western. Like the first 3 teams in the familiarity and how they've all been so dominant. It's crazy to think about.
It is. Now, if we're going to be real candid with this, guys, Central Washington points per game margin, 25 scored, 23 allowed. That's not great for a playoff team, if we're going to be real honest.
Yeah.
So, but it it kind of says that they live pretty close there to the win and loss on a lot of games.
Yeah.
Now, does that also tell you that they win those games? If they're 7-1 against D2, they sure are. So, some of the other things that I think jump out here is there's a fair amount of parity between the Northern Sun teams. You have Augie there in yellow, and then as you move left to right, you've got in the purple, you've got Mankato, and then you've got Bemidji. The offensive points per game are almost the same. Now, where's the biggest difference? It's the Augustana defense. Okay, so and that creates more of that points per game differential. Now, if you go ahead and you move a little further, kind of down the slate there, as you mentioned, the yards per game margin is also greater for the RMAC and Lone Star all the way to the left. Okay, now, the one thing is Western. Okay, their offense is not up near the top. 409 for yards per game. That would fit, third out of the 4, or third amongst Northern Sun teams right there. So it kind of tells you that they're not necessarily as explosive necessarily. And then as you go ahead and you come back to the Northern Sun teams, offensively, you got Mankato at 444. You got Bemidji 422. Those are a little bit closer to some of those teams that you see on the left, but mine's at 533, almost stunning. And the fact that they only give up 250, they have a yardage margin between the two of plus 283. That I believe might be the best nationally.
That is crazy.
Yeah. But the only other team that's even close to this stuff is Harding, actually.
And they run the way they run their stuff. Harding, they play a different brand of football altogether than mine.
Totally. So they don't have the balance that is kind of beneficial during playoff time.
Yeah.
So Mines has great balance. So that's the biggest difference right there.
What I think is most telling of all these mindsets, the one that pops to me the most, is the turnover margin, though. Plus 18
I
in
think they're
turnovers.
like second or third in the country there.
That's how you win ball games. That's what a lot of these ball games will. The turnovers are everything in football, in my opinion. Maybe I'm a defensive back and I have a jaded point of view, but turnovers are king, and I think that speaks to how they're able to get up on teams. Like, not only is their offense just insanely explosive, they're taking the ball away from teams as well.
Well, and I take a look. You spoke about turnovers. You know, Drew Nash, quarterback for Western, he has 6 picks on the year, 2 of them in the Mines game, 2 of them in the Permian game.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got to, he's going to have better ball security in those big games for them going forward. Because I mean, he's got ability. He's also an underrated runner. He can scoot a little bit.
Oh yeah. I think the way Western, because their offense, like Davon Butler, their running back, and Braden Hogan, they're going to feed those guys. They're going to try to establish the run. But their passing game, Drew Montez leads them statistically, but like they're really balanced. Like, they're not, targeting one receiver. Right. So I think, with that being said, they may be able to kind of try to avoid Tanner Volk. I mean, that if I was coaching him, that's what I would do. I would just before every play, find Tanner Volk before the play starts, Drew, and make sure you don't throw it in his direction, because if you do, he's going to make you pay. He's had 4 2-interception games. He had 2 last week. He had 2 last week, and they got blown out, and he still had 2. So I think that what you just pointed out, how Drew's 2 poorest performances were against those 2 teams they're surrounded by, I think that's very telling.
Well, talking about, turnovers and such, UTPB is just barely over, the midline mark there. But, and watching them, they got a 2-headed monster at running back. Mm-hmm. Both guys can make plays in space. Then they spread the ball out big time amongst their wideouts. And, when they go 4 wide, you can't just assume it's going to be like 1 or 2. It could be,
4 verts.
Yeah. So
4 verts.
And they throw their verts better than anybody else in this mix from what I've seen. Mm-hmm. They will hit you down the field, and they have the athletes to do it also.
What do you think about UTPB and their lack of experience on this stage? Like, they're playing a Bemidji team that, although they haven't had the most playoff success, they've been in the playoffs. Like, I remember them playing Mines last year. Right. Or was it the year before, when they played Mines a couple years in a row, I want to say. But like Bemidji, Mankato, Augie teams that have had, Central Washington was a playoff team back in my day. Western was just 2 years ago. UTPB's the new kid on the block, per se. How do you think they handle that, especially with such a young coach? How do you think that factors into all this?
And by the way, he loves being called a young coach, and I say that joking.
I love pointing it out, because it's more. It makes him. What he's doing. He's my age, so like. I'm saying that with the utmost respect. I'm not saying
right. I think the whole staff is AC. They're a very young staff, and what they've done is incredibly impressive. I think each team has some little X factor or thing that you can talk to away from the numbers that need to be thought about a little bit. And UTPB this is a maiden voyage for them, this playoff thing. Okay. Mm-hmm. How do they respond to this type of pressure, having never been in it before? Playoff football is a little different. Mm-hmm. Now, do they have the dudes, and have they shown pretty well just last week in a big pressure game? Of course they have. Yeah. Now, if you take a look around, Bemidji State, you alluded to a minute ago. I mean, they've played in the last 2 seasons, they've played 4 playoff games. They come out of the gate, they've won their first round game each of the last 2 years. They were down in Texas a year ago, lost to Angelo, competed for probably the first 2/3 of the game. Against the Angelo team that was, pretty good on both sides of the football.
Oh yeah.
and their quarterback, Brandon Alt, this is his last go around, and at least to my understanding, he might have 5 more years for all I know. But And their coaching staff, they've been through all of this. They've been through the travel to Texas. So all of these things, they bring a ton of experience, which I think makes for an interesting dynamic in that football game. Then you move on to some of the other ones. Central Washington, they've only played eight D2 contests. I think that we would all agree that the Lone Star maybe wasn't as strong this year as we were hoping it was going to be. But you know what? They're going to get a chance to prove us wrong here, because a lot of those games with UTBB, they weren't really all that tested. I mean, some of these teams are going through a brand new quarterback, like Kingsville and so forth. West Texas was in a reboot. You had different stuff like that going on. Angelo was down because of the fact that they had so much transfer issues with the portal, where they lost a ton of good personnel. So as I take a look at this, each one of these games kind of has some of that. Augie, they're an experienced group, but Coach OJ and their group is looking to get their first playoff win under Coach Olszewski, whereas he's going against Todd Hoffner and Mankato. We've got a collection of playoff wins. So, and a team that they beat during the regular season didn't expect that to happen. And that's going to create a very interesting matchup there, and I'll be there on Saturday. So I think
I'll be at Western.
And that's awesome. And because now there's word that they're going to be playing.
The bowl is open magically. Okay. I've been up there a couple of times now. I was there in 2021 when they want to share the conference title, and they announced that they were breaking ground like right after that season, and I've been patiently waiting, but thank God they're having it open. I think they still got to do some construction to make it look pretty, but like the inside, it's gonna get packed out. It's gonna be fun. But one of these other things I want to point out with Central Washington and ask you how you feel about it. What about the elevation?
That's the last thing I was going to mention.
Western is the highest stadium in college football, regardless of division.
Right. And what happens when your defense just had a drive against them and the other team scores and they come off the field and if your offense goes 3 and out, all of a sudden you're back out there and your lungs are feeling it. So that's definitely something I think that to keep an eye on. So I mean, really, what it comes down to for us here, buddy, is that we've kind of looked at all the stats here. I think at this point we're looking at a breakdown of who we think is going to win each game. So as we take a look at the first game on the slate here, we've got Mankato visiting Augustana in that first one. I'm letting you go first. Give me your thoughts, how you're getting there, and who you picking.
I'm gonna roll with Augie. I know it's extremely tough to beat a team twice, but I love the brand of football they've been playing lately. They've been playing opportunistic football. Like I said, Jared Epperson's been on a tear. I think he's gonna. I think if I'm not mistaken, he's a senior this year.
Yep.
I think his leadership and just the role he's been on, and Mankato's inconsistencies and coming off a loss last week, like they did lose. It's not like they lost just that one game to Augie and they've wanted to get them back all this time. Like they lost last week. Sure. I'm gonna roll with Augustana.
You know what? Mankato's inconsistency bothers me when it comes to having to try and make a pick like this. Augustana, with the exception of losing in the snowstorm game, where they gave up 20 yards and somehow found a way to lose. Augustana would have been unbeaten. And
they'd be on that 2 line right now.
Right. And, I think you could even make a case that maybe they should be, considering the strength of some of the opponents they went through. But at the same time, something I normally don't talk a lot about, AC, but they are probably the best at special teams in this 17 grouping. They've got an all-conference kick returner, punt returner, and kicker and punter. And when you have that type of thing going on, where you've got that good of special teams, That normally we're looking for the smallest of differences between two good teams. That's one of those type of things. If Mankato can run the football against Augie, this could be flipped and be a real long day for the Vikings. That said, Augustana was able to really smother their running game last time. I don't think that's just going to all of a sudden change. I think Augustana has figured out how to defend them right now, and I'm going to take Augustana to win that game at home. Let's take a look at what was that?
Just to speak to your special teams and how I'm a huge special teams fan. The one time I did make the playoffs in my 3 years in 2016, we beat Mines on a blocked field goal in double overtime. We beat South Dakota Mines for the conference championship. Blocked a field goal, I returned it to the house. The next week, we beat Azusa Pacific. Blocked field goal, returned to the house. Special teams win ball games, people. Just for all the fans out there. Take it from me. Special teams.
For all those watching, did you see how stealthy he was putting his touchdown in there? So part about return. That was like stealth, not stealth kind of thing going on there. But by the way, yeah. Let's take a look at our second game. We've got Central Washington going to Gunnison and playing Western Colorado. And you start off first for me. What are your thoughts on that one?
Two very stout defenses. I think one team, Western Colorado, has the decisive edge offensively. Not to say that Central Washington offense is bad or anything. They have a great running back who's had a great season. I think this one boils down to which front seven is going to be able to stop the running game. Western hasn't they've lost when their running games got shut down. I'm going to go with Western. They're at home. They have the elevation factor. Their defense may not have one single player as prolific as Tanner Volk, who's arguably the best DB in the country, but they have a bunch of guys that are standout guys. Ricky Freeman is one of the best defensive ends in Division II. I think Central's inability, based on the statistics and stuff that I've seen, to pass the ball, I think that's going to bite him, and I think Western's going to win, not in a blowout, but comfortably.
I think this game, if this game was flip-flopped and it was at Central Washington, I think I'd almost lean that way just because of how much I think home field would mean in this matchup. Because that would be a long trip, obviously, from for Western at that point, and playing at a place they've never been before, all this other stuff. But at the same time, I'll be real interested to see. Western's very aggressive defensively. They remind me of almost like Duluth and how aggressive they are in my conference. If they go unsound at times because of their blitzing, I'm curious to see if Tyler Flanagan breaks some runs against them because he's a load in the running game. Or if they're able to get, make some plays during that time. But I think the bigger concern I would have for Central Washington is having a redshirt freshman quarterback in his fourth start or whatever we're looking at, going against a defense where you don't know where the blitz is coming from. And that's a hard deal to ask. I mean, it really is.
Oh, yeah.
So for some of the reasons you mentioned, home field and all that kind of stuff, I think Western's going to be pumped about playing on their home field again after having to play on the soccer field the entire season, right?
2 years in a row now.
Right. So I think they're going to be amped for that. I like Western Colorado to win that one. Let's take a look at our
so far.
Final. Yeah, right. Our third and final game. And I don't know if we're going to agree on this one. I'll go first. We have Bemidji State, the Beavers, traveling down to the Falcons of UT Permian Basin. Kind of I want to say clash of styles, but I guarantee you Bemidji's going to go down there and try and out-physical them. Bemidji is, they've become one of those very physical teams of the North, similar to Mankato. I think, personally, the experience that Bemidji has, having played in plenty of these big games over the years, lately, their quarterback, Brandon Alt, the fact that their front four can get after you and sack a lot, I think that they're going to put enough pressure on the offense for Permian Basin. And I think that Bemidji's going to be able to do it just enough offensively to come out with a win. Now, I don't get the impression me and my upset pick are necessarily common thinking amongst the rest of my D2 columnists. So you give me, where are you going on this one, my friend?
This has been the hardest one of the three to pick by far. Because like you said, I'm a firm believer in great quarterback play is what wins the big games. And
we got a great matchup with that for sure.
Oh yeah. So but Bemidji, like you said, the experience. Brandon's Alt's experience in these big playoff games is definitely a factor to me. I think the thing that hasn't been talked about enough, and I think is going to play a huge factor, is I think UTPB has some dogs up front on their defensive line. I don't know that they have the best motor. I don't know that they're 100% every play, but play here or play there, they got some dogs. So I'm gonna roll with UTPB. I think they have the offense to do it. I think they have the quarterback play to match up with a guy of Alt's caliber. They're on their home field. I know they're super excited. They just won the LSC. I believe they're on such a high right now. It's like they believe anything is possible. They were picked 7th in that conference, and they just won it outright. I don't. Aside from that blemish against Western, which really was a close game in that, they've been dominant all season. So I'm gonna roll UTPB in the young guys. I think they get it done, but I do think that's the game that's going to come down to. Could be whoever has the last possession in that one.
Well, we will see. Folks, we will be doing this each of the next few weeks here while we still have the Super Region 4 bracket that we do. I want to thank AC for coming on, and you know what? This is great doing something with you here, buddy, and getting your insight, being able to put all this kind of towards our fans and giving them a real good look at these playoff teams. You know what? AC, do you have any final words for our fans?
It's always a pleasure getting to talk some good D2 football with you. Thanks to all the fans that tune in. I can't wait to see what are your guys' picks. Like and comment on this. Let us know who you guys think are to pick these games. I'm waiting. I'm trying to get famous enough to where I can be like a Coach Poe and end up on somebody's Twitter page.
Well, hey, I always appreciate you making time, buddy. Hey, for everybody at D2, there's going to be a Super Region show for all 4 Super Regions, not just me and this guy. And so check them out. And we don't have anything more for you. We're out. Thanks, folks.